Yeah.
Shona Vertue, welcome to A Need to Read. And thank you very much for coming on. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm good. As I was saying before, I'm covered in bruises, but I'm good.
Good. Well, that means you've been training and that means you're happy most of the time.
Very happy. Yeah. That's that. I like how you said most of the time.
Yeah, well, it's never going to be all the time, is it? Because if you want to be happy all the time, you're just reaching for something that you're probably never going to attain.
Absolutely. And that's wise. Did you get that from the Tao of Pooh? Does he discuss that?
The Tao of
the
Pooh.
The Tao of Pooh.
No, but there's a lot in there that's really, really smart. So there's the Wu Wei. Pronunciation could be wrong.
The Wu Wei.
But he described...
it depends on how you say it. But yeah, sorry, go. He describes
it as the Pooh Wei. And the Pooh Wei is essentially just doing nothing. He doesn't really have a plan ever. He just goes around and is Pooh Bear. And it's essentially about not interfering with nature and nature's course. And you just do stuff and you just sort of go with the flow. Really nice sort of philosophy. And now I love Taoism / Taoism. The Tao.
Taoism. Yeah, the Tao. The Tao Te Ching. You should read that next.
Yeah. Is it heavy?
It's heavy.
Yeah. I mean, if we can put it in Winnie the Pooh, I'm way more happy with that.
Do they talk about like harmony, living in harmony? Is that what that whole principle is?
Yeah, essentially sort of at one with the universe, and sort of it's all about humility and stuff like that. It's a really interesting philosophy. I thought I was just going to be stoic till I die, but now I like Taoism.
I've moved away from stoicism because they're all racist as fuck. Oh, I didn't ask. Are we allowed
you can. Oh no, you swear as much as you want. It doesn't matter. You can't demonetize something that's not monetized. So it's good.
Yes. So they're really racist. They're all they all had slaves. They all even Marcus Aurelius in his meditations, like at the beginning or the end or somewhere in there, he starts talking about how he's like, and I'm such a good person because I see my slaves as people and I was kind to them and I don't rape my slaves. And he's sort of saying horrible things like that, but sort of praising himself. And it's like, what? And I recognize that for that period, there was obviously going to be a lot of sort of that anyway, but it's just it's sort of it's tainted stoicism for me a little bit. I'm like, it's hard to separate it, and go, oh, okay. But, it's kind of like, anyway.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because in those times, they definitely were shagging little boys as well. And that's also frowned upon, to say the least.
Yes, exactly. You're gonna have to put a trigger warning on this now.
Yeah, right. Actually, well, I was expecting that with you. Don't worry.
Why? I didn't mean to take it there straight away. It was just that you said stoicism, and I was like, oh, it came straight to my mind because I'm really disappointed that it's sort of it's like, oh, I'm struggling to sort of appreciate it in the same way.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the, I think, especially across history.
Yeah.
There's no one's in the right if you go back in time nowadays. All these people that are sort of these great figures, you'd be like, well, they were racist, or they owned slaves, or
or misogynists, or it's all of that. Yeah.
And the thing is, at the time, I guess morality was maybe different for them, and that's just evolved in time. Yep.
Do you think that one day we're going to look back on people who have written amazing philosophies, but they ate meat, and we're going to look back on them and go, do you know what? Shona Vertue, she created the Virtue method, but she ate meat.
Yeah.
What a dick.
Should we stop the podcast now? Because I didn't realize that you're a meat eater, and meat is murder, and I can't agree with this. So
no, but it is. Okay. Well, it's great. No, UKC, yeah. No, but meat is murder, and it is something I'd like to work towards. Veganism for sure, absolutely.
I would, but chicken wings. I just love wangs, man.
I know, but I think that if you had to kill the chicken, look at it in the eye, catch it, kill it, do all those things, I think that you would probably be okay with letting go of chicken wings.
So, little story time. So when I was training in the Marines, they do like a survival training part.
Yep.
And they give you a chicken, so you're like your little team of 3 that stays in a hut. They give you this live chicken, and they teach you how to kill it properly and humanely. And they teach you, like, you have to shake it up and down so the blood goes to its head, so it sort of passes out, and then you put a stick over its head and you pull it. And they're like, right, if anyone hurts the chicken, you're in trouble. So I was like, okay, well, I best do this properly then. I put the stick on this chicken's head, go to yank it up, and I'm like, oh, well, the head's not on the floor. I look to the right, and there's this chicken is gurning like there's no tomorrow, beak's half hanging off, and I'm like, oh no, I'm in so much shit. I'm in so much shit here. And yeah, then I ended up just having to put my foot on its head and pull it off. And then when we cooked it, we just boiled it. So we absolutely butchered it. It was just like rubbery chicken that I just abused before I ate it. So any vegan listeners, sorry, but
you're gonna have to put a trigger warning on this. Because that is so severe. See, this is the thing. You're more capable of doing it than I am, whereas the fact that I'm reacting to the story makes me more of a hypocrite, though. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, if I'm capable of eating chicken or fish or any of those sorts of things, and yet I'm incapable of hearing a story like that, it's kind of like, well, hypocritical.
But you can't. Nobody's perfect.
No.
I mean, we can strive for it, but we can always fall short. I think it's good to get used to falling short in life.
Yeah. Perfectionism. We can talk about perfectionism.
We can get on that later.
Yeah, but I think there's definitely space to consider the fact that I think at some point humanity will move in the direction of veganism, whether people like it or not, just purely because it's like, if we're moving in this real direction around race, and we're seeing the disparities there and the inequalities there, I think that eventually the next progression is to say, okay, well, why are we still eating sentient beings? Why are we still breeding them and killing them? And anyway, you're like,
we'll get there.
I didn't know I was going to get a fucking vegan on the
show. Well, I know you're not actually a vegan, so it's fine.
No, I just love vegans. I wish I was.
Yeah, to be fair, respect, because like it is probably a really healthy way to be. And I stopped eating beef and pork, and I never liked lamb anyway last year. And the other day I tried some bacon, and I was like, actually, do you know what? I don't miss this at all. Like, it's good. I wasn't that bothered by it. And then my mum was like, oh yeah, I got you some vegan bacon. I was like, look, I don't care about bacon that much. Otherwise, I'd just eat it. Like, if I really wanted it, I'd just eat it. I don't want any of this fake stuff that's meant to be like bacon. I've just given up bacon. Don't give me some pretend stuff that, like, God knows what it actually is, like rolled out some sort of pancake that you grill. I'm not into it.
Okay, but in saying that, don't you think that we've come to the point in society whereby, in terms of our technological advancements, even freaking sending people to the moon, which obviously we've been doing for a long time now, but it's like, if you can do that, and yet we can't figure out a way to keep ourselves nutritionally capable of not having to kill other lives for our survival, it's sort of like, where the fuck are our priorities here? But I agree with, I just hope I know this is so controversial, but I am not against GMO foods. I'm not against people being able to grow. If we can develop the ability to actually grow foods, I think it will be really amazing for social inequalities. But then again, it's like, not in the hands of capitalism and blah 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 blah. Let's change the subject.
I knew I was going to get so many words from you today that were going to be way too long for me. I was thinking I need to send like a pre-warning, like, hey Shona, you mind dumbing this down for me a bit? But where, like, you obviously are educated around all these kind of like subjects and like your social sort of justice and stuff like that. What kind of books have you read, or like content that you sort of consume? Actually, let's stick it to books, because obviously that's what we're here for. But
that's what we're here for. Yes.
What's your sort of go-to book that kind of kicked this off? Do you feel like you had this in you, like as an innate sort of passion for this stuff, or have you sort of learned it through sort of reading books and like opening your mind up to it?
So I'm trying to think about how far I go back with the story, because I think that I've always, I have a lot of Catholic guilt for someone who's never been Catholic. Like, I have this weird thing, like, no, I feel like, I have this like guilt for my existence. So that's why I say Catholic guilt. It's kind of like this guilt of like, just of existing, and I've had to really try to dismantle it a little, because then it sort of inhibits your ability to be successful, because you're kind of like, oh, but I don't deserve that, or I shouldn't be striving for that. Well, there are so many other people that, you know, this and that. So there's a lot of that comparison in that sense. Imposter syndrome comes into it as well, but it's definitely like this guilt of like, hang on, if I'm free, then everyone should be free. And I don't mean that in a sort of like, I'm so compassionate, and but it's something that's always on my mind, and it has been for a really long time. So I think probably, but what I didn't, and I'm like, how far back do I go? Do I go back to like I studied Buddhism for 7 years when I was, when I was 19. I'd started learning martial art, and then I ended up sort of joining this group that were also doing, so he would only teach martial art if we also learned Buddhism. And then I was at the same time doing a psych degree, and I was so interested in the correlation, and not just correlation, but just the interesting similarities between Buddhism and modern Western psychology as well. And how even in Buddhism, these ancient texts were talking about the construct of a human character, and our human needs and our desires, and, you know, like all different kinds of things that motivate us. So I found that incredibly interesting. And for me, I always felt like the more you know about the human being, the safer you are. So I was very hungry for like knowledge on humans and how our brain works, which is really fucking manipulative. Because if I'm honest, it was probably just so that I would feel safe enough to be like 2 steps ahead of every other brain. So I could emotionally manipulate people.
Oh no. This is
I'm doing it right
path.
Yeah, that's a whole other path. Yeah.
Well, you've had many lives then, really. I feel there's a lot to you.
I have had many. Yeah, no.
What? Because you're studying again now, aren't you?
Yeah, so I didn't finish the degree, and I got really into Buddhism, and I then wanted to work in health and fitness. So I actually dropped out of that for a number of reasons, but then it's always been something that I've wanted to do, and I just never did it. So the reason I've gone back to study it is because it's like, no, I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a psychologist. So to come back to your original question, I think it started with Buddhism, and then it wasn't until I moved to London, actually, and I began working with my manager, Francesca Zampi, who, it was her and her business partner, Alice, who they started an agency. But when I started working with them, they really helped me to dismantle a lot of my internalized misogyny.
Okay.
So I had a lot.
Explain that for the people at the back.
Right. So misogyny is basically, I don't have like a Webster dictionary in front of me. I feel like I should read the Webster dictionary, but basically it's essentially based in hating women. So misogyny is women hating, to put it in real layman's terms. And the theory around internalized misogyny is that as women, because there's a whole debate around whether a woman could actually hate a woman. Like, can women actually hate themselves? And I think the answer is yes. I sit on the fence of absolutely, we can totally move into a space of self-loathing, generally speaking, across the board of humans, but also if you identify as a woman, just based on everything that's in society around us, it's very easy to then also hate yourself as a woman. And there's a lot of misogyny around us. So I didn't realize just how much I had until I actually started working with my manager, Francesca, who sort of just swayed me in the direction of different feminine texts. You know, it was like Roxane Gay. It was, she's a Black feminist, absolutely incredible. I would highly recommend you read some of this stuff too, actually, because I think you would.
Let me get my pen. Actually, I could just watch this recording back. Roxane Gay.
Roxane Gay, exactly. Everyone, in fact, part of my tripod to hold my laptop in place, Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex, which I actually haven't read yet, but it's a big one. It's quite, and it might be a little bit dated now.
Yeah.
But it's those sorts of things that I started to look into and think, oh shit, like I have a lot of internalized misogyny that I need to break down. And I was also in the fitness industry, which, do you know much about the male gaze? Have you read much or heard much about this terminology?
No.
Oh, it's a big one. So the male gaze, and I actually feel terrible for bringing up because I can't remember the feminist who introduced this concept, but it was actually based more around films and the way in which film, and maybe it was literature as well, but I think, oh gosh, there are going to be feminists that are listening, they'll be like, oh, she's absolutely slaughtering this description, so I apologize.
For those that are listening and they think that, like I said earlier, nobody's perfect. No one's going to remember everything. I'm sure you didn't take loads of notes when you were reading these books. You just read it and you've done your part and you can remember the little bit. So that's the beauty of books.
Thank you. This is a shit Cliff's Notes, but basically it's basically based on the fact that a lot of films were created and directed according to the male gaze. So the way a man would want to watch and engage with the footage. So female characters would often only talk about, they'd only feature, their conversation would be based around the male role. There'd always be a male lead and then a female kind of side part, right?
Yeah.
And then the women that are in there, they're always like beautiful, somewhat dainty. They're never like alcoholics and strong. They're always like alcoholics and really neurotic and weak. Yeah. Whereas men are always portrayed as like, kind of like they start their morning with whiskey, but then they're also really like, I don't know,
whiskey and a cigarette, and they go and shoot
whiskey and a cigarette, and totally.
Back to their dainty little wife who's been doing her housework all day.
Totally, and like she's a bit, exactly. She's a bit naggy, and she's always one that like doesn't know how to get out of some like situation in an action movie, and she runs upstairs instead of like outside, or like doesn't do anything practical. All of that sort of stuff is like, so there was not enough
empowerment for women.
Not enough
empowerment,
films
and literature and stuff.
Totally. And I don't know if it's literature. So I definitely think, I'm pretty sure, it's 80% sure that it's based on films, but now you can see it everywhere. So in fitness, a lot of the fitness pages will very much be for the male gaze. It's like a woman standing there, like arched back. There's, like think about things that are filmed whereby, it's like a delt workout, and yet it's filmed like from right?
Like literally straight underneath the legs. Like, oh, look at my shoulders. Like I literally can't see past your vagina. So
I can't see past your labia right now. So I'm just getting full labia workout. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's that sort of stuff. And so it's seeped into sort of all forms of media. And fitness being very male dominated is very much that, has a lot of male gaze stuff. So when I started working with Francesca and Alice, they were always like, okay, so by posting a picture of you with your back arched against a waterfall, like how, and they never said it in, this sounds really passive aggressive, but they would deliver it in a way that actually just made me think about it. And so they were like, do you think that may alienate women and actually more just attract men? And I was like, interesting. Yes. Yeah. That doesn't teach a woman anything about her body other than, look at my great body and look at how sexual I can be. That's not empowering for a woman at all, and it's only about luring men in. So the fitness industry is still very much like soaking with that sort of stuff, right? So that was probably the beginning of my journey into all of those sorts of things, was actually through feminism.
Okay, that's good.
Much to the dismay of many of my ex-boyfriends, by the way, who've taken feminism.
Well, I've grown up in a pretty feminist household. I would say I've got probably more feminine energy than most sort of blokes. And I had a stage in my life where I was probably playing up to being the lad because I hadn't had like the male energy in my household. Like I do. I've got my dad's here. He's great. But my mum's like the breadwinner. She's like a strong, powerful woman. My sister's grown into that as well. Like she's like dominating her work. She's like a great feminist, has made massive movements within her company for sort of the women in the company. And I feel like I really get on with girls, and people always like, oh, you must be gay. I'm like, well, I'm definitely not. Like thought about it, 100% I'm not. And me and another friend have spoken about like the feminine energy and being able to accept that. And I think a lot of men nowadays can't quite get to grips with like a strong woman. If you look at all of my ex-girlfriends, they've all been like really strong women. And I think like I'm not afraid to admit like I probably need that. Like if I'm this like, hey, you step up, I'm like, oh no, can't. I can't step it up. You just be the strong one for now.
But also, I think if the first woman you fell in love with, which is your mother, not necessarily in a sexual way, but it's like, if
Freud
that's,
things.
Yeah, Freud things, like Oedipus. You said it. I didn't say it. But it's like, I think you do gravitate to that. And I have to say, like, I tend to, I always speak to guys about their, gosh, this is also very annoying for them too. But I don't mean to like therapize. It's more just like getting an understanding of their history with their family. And so actually often when I know that they were actually raised by women or raised with women around, I'm always like, yeah, totally. And not in every case, obviously, but it's
hey, your
definitely
dad went walkabout when you were 3. You've got feminine energy. We like you.
Yes. Oh God, I know, but it's really, it is interesting. And I can't comment on it too much because I haven't experienced, obviously I'm not a man, but also, you know, we always talk about like women in the sense of like daddy issues. And it's always like kind of slapped on like a girl that's quote unquote crazy, which we can talk about as well. But
triggered. You triggered now. You've triggered yourself.
Yeah, triggered the internalized suppression of that. Anyway, but no one ever really talks about the fact that a boy will have mummy issues. Not really. Not if he didn't have a strong female presence in his childhood.
Yeah, I definitely think I think I've seen that in the past. I think I know people certainly that don't have levels of respect for women because of the way that they potentially view their mum. Exactly. And I think that's a lot in the case when you see like with divorces, you see like if the dad walked out or something, or the dad left, or the dad cheated, and then the mum responded naturally to that and was really upset and took a while to come around to the fact of sort of being like a single mum. Some kids subconsciously may view that as weak, and they then lose respect sort of in the long term. This is something like I've read a little bit about it, but only like articles, no books or anything like that. So it's not something I'm well versed on. That's just what my conclusions from little articles.
From the articles. Yeah, but still, I mean, I think that, have you been to therapy before?
Yeah. Oh, your boy loves therapy.
Do ya?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm all for team therapy. I was pushed towards it for years by my mum. Didn't really bother until last year when I went and had like 12 sessions. I'm going back this week on Wednesday. I'm really excited for it.
So excellent. Yes. Let's break down that fucking stigma. It's so shit. Mate, not therapists. That's number one thing we need to probably tick off. But also, I think also, you know, it's one of those things that I think is really helpful. Not just for, because a lot of people don't like going into their childhood, and that's understandable if you have had a traumatic childhood, but it doesn't always have to go there, right? Yeah. It might go in that direction if you want it to, but not all therapists are going to sit down and be like, right, tell me about your
there's all different types of therapy. So like the therapy I get is based on ACT therapy. There's a really good book by Russ Harris. He's an Australian psychologist actually. And it's essentially, it takes you through the journey of everything you need for ACT therapy. And he says you read the book quite slowly, make sure you're doing the exercises. And it's a book that I think I spoke about it in episode 1 of the podcast, but if anyone's curious about therapy and maybe that they feel that they're not sort of taking care of their mind all that well, but they either like one, don't have access to the funds for therapy, because of course that's something it's a stumbling block for a lot of people.
Yep.
That kind of book where you learn a little bit more about your anxiety, a little bit more about when you're feeling sad, and being able to like label your feelings and stuff like that, and actually just accept what is. That's what the book's all about, and it is brilliant.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's really helpful. I love those sorts of psychology books. I think I think they're just so the ones that. Do you read much fiction? Sorry, I realize I'm asking you all the questions.
Hey, no, that's fine. This is a conversation. I'm not a chat show host. I'm here to have conversations with people that are smarter than me and that I want to. Oh yeah, exactly. So fiction, not really. I've read a few books recently. One on the subject of sort of feminism is 11 Minutes by Paulo Coelho. Follows a Brazilian prostitute who sort of moves to Switzerland and sort of just plays the lady of the night for about a year and uses and abuses men. And it follows her sort of journey of, what do I value? Is it love? Is it sex? Is it passion? Like it gets a bit fruity at stages as well. Like she really experiments with all of the types.
Really interesting.
But great book.
Yes, I've only read Into the Aleph. He loves to go into detail about those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But I am not much of a fiction reader. That's why I'm curious, because I'm
not really, but I'm trying to vary.
What about Sellout, Paul Beatty? You thought about going down that? Oh, that's lots of award. It's a book. It's satire. I haven't even started reading it, but it keeps getting heavily recommended. So you've got Paul Beatty. These are two Black writers, by the way, as well. So you diversify your
reading.
So do I, because I think for a long time I was very much reading a lot of like white authors. That's the other thing I would say, is if you're going to read feminism, definitely read like Black feminism, or read from a woman's perspective as well, which is interesting because and this is another example of, sometimes I think a lot of my internalized misogyny coming up is that for a long time I really only like to read male voices.
Okay.
Yeah, really interesting. I have so much internalized.
But you've delved deep. I did buy the other day, and I've got it on my bookshelf, Girl, Woman, Other, which is a fiction book it's like from all the sort of reading I've done around sort of like Black authors, and I was looking at recommendations. Like the only books I'd read by Black authors that I know of, because I mean I don't really know what any of the authors look like, I can just see the names, but it's David Goggins, the Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race.
Rennie,
so those
really an incredible book, and came off the back of a blog post. Have you read
Sorry,
are you reading Me and White Supremacy yet?
I haven't yet. I was going to chuck that on Audible, because I've got I can see I've got like 2 credits, because I've just been reading. I haven't really listened to anything recently, so I've got these credits built up. So I've seen a lot of people. I think I saw Siobhan have recommended that, and there's a lot of sort of recommendations coming from there. Yeah,
you need to get that in your AirPods.
Yeah,
go for a walk, listen. It's confronting AF.
Yeah,
like really confronting. Yeah,
you feel awkward listening, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm probably a bit of a shit. Like, is it one of those?
It's like you just suddenly realize how insidious white supremacy is. And like, even for me, and she talks about it, Layla talks about it. You're getting hot, mate.
I told you this room's hot anyway. And
but we're also talking about white supremacy.
I'm like treading really carefully, because I'm like, oh fuck. But no, it's good, because we need to talk about it.
We need to talk about it.
It's a great conversation for people to listen to, because people, like where I come from in like Dorset, like it's not very multicultural. It's good for, and like especially the UK audience, wherever they are, like it's probably not as diverse as it could be. I don't know if you can hear me. I just moved the microphone away, but
I can hear you.
These conversations, like I'm hot anyway, but where people get hotter, they're the conversations that people need to be having.
Exactly. Absolutely. So Layla talks about even biracial people reading this book and working through Me and White Supremacy. And it's been really interesting to witness, where I am confronted on my white privilege as a biracial person, as much as I can also face and have faced, racism in other ways for the brown side of me. So it's a really important read. It's really confronting, yes, but it's like, it's just not going to change unless we all each take responsibility. And one of the things that I love about what she does mention it in the book, but she mentions it everywhere. Like, even if you just were to follow her on Instagram as well, I would always recommend buying the products, but if you follow her on Instagram while you're also reading it, it's really helpful. And one of the things she talks about is she doesn't call people out. So there are a lot of people, anti-racist people, that will call people out, and they do it because it's also another good way or good method for dismantling it. But what she believes is she doesn't call people out and say their name. She'll call out their behavior. But what she says is this is not about you getting angry at that person for what they did. It's actually about you saying, where in life have I also done this? And that I love that about her, because it's sort of like, it's not about naming and shaming. It's actually about saying, I'm going to name and shame an example of behavior. And I want you to, rather than just sit there and say, oh, how dare that person do that? I would never do that. Actually sit and go, is there a point in my life where I ever did something like that or similar, or, you know, so
getting off
and a lot
ice.
of people say this, Me and White Supremacy is a book that you do. It's not a book that you just read. So
that's good.
You want to commit.
I like those kind of books. I really like, the main thing that I've thought of more recently is just being able to get inside other people's brains when you're reading a book. And I'm like, that's how they think. That's incredible. And I love that about the, well, I'm no longer talking to white people about race, is like, it's aggressive and it's passionate, and it's not like I'm really progressive left, angry at everything. It's like, hey, this is really fucking shit. Yeah. Let's sort this out. We all kind of need to like come together on this. And this is why I don't like having these conversations with people that are really ignorant.
Yes. Because their eyes glaze over, and she talks about that really. Yeah. It's really, it's amazing. And it's all stuff that needs to be done. Do you know, when you said that you were doing this podcast, and actually when you announced a need to read, I was like, fuck yes, because it's like so much about what you do and the content that you put out there and everything that you talk about is, it's like, that's the direction we need to move in. And I think we talked about it. I can't remember what we talked about on voice notes or text or whatever, but we were talking, or maybe DMs, but it was something about, it had a lot to do with kind of being, you know, I don't want to say lad because there's a lot around lad culture.
Being the lad, being one of the lads.
Yeah, but like being whatever, being like super masculine, still into like BJJs, really sporty. But then on the other side of it, also being like, yeah, but I also love to read. Yeah. It's awesome.
The thing is, it shocked loads of people as well. And that just goes to show me how I was kind of like, I guess holding back in a certain way. Like, when I came out, I didn't realize like you could read. I'm like, well, yeah, this is essentially the whole podcast is just a really big act just to let everyone know that I can read. Like, hey, I can actually read, guys. So like, just listen to the podcast and I'll tell you more about it. But I remember you saying at the time, you're like, this is really important to sort of like break down stereotypes. And I've had people message me that I would never have thought would have picked up a book, and like they've said like I've inspired them, and that is great. Like, yeah, I'm well happy with that. Unfortunately, my audience is like 82% women.
Is it? Why is that unfortunate?
Because we're talking about breaking down the stereotypes in men. I feel like
82%.
82% is pretty heavy.
Just throw some extra BJJ stuff in there.
Yeah.
Lure them in.
Lure them in. Like, hey guys, I can also fight. Not very well, exactly. But I give it a go. Maybe I'll go kill another chicken or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Tell the chicken story.
Yeah.
That's a hectic story. You've got a good DAS.
Yeah.
For the record, for everyone listening, I've been choked and like kimura'd. I'm pretty sure you kimura'd me as well.
Yeah. Just to let you know, everyone, context, like this is jiu-jitsu. Please don't take this out of context.
Jiu-jitsu, yes, no.
But a DAS is a choke that I have really been working on and pretty much ignored everything else about the fundamentals. I remember when I training in Bali, like when I was training with Diran, I just kept going for a DAS, whatever position I was in. He was like, bro, why don't you just do your fundamentals right? And I was like, yeah, I suppose I probably should.
Fundamentals are good, but actually Keenan talks about, and I've had a lot of actually really, really like a few world champions have talked about this. They talk about one of the best things to do to get really good at jiu-jitsu is to actually just pick one submission and do that for like a month. And all you do is that submission, and you just work it so hard and then you move on to the next, like until you could do it from any position, in any situation. That's the submission that you go for, and you restrict yourself to, listen to me, like for the record, I'm a fucking white belt, but I'm just
we're
telling
both
other people.
two white belts talking about jiu-jitsu on the internet. Everyone's I've just lost another 1% of my male following because they're like, oh, this guy sucks.
Fucking shit white belt. Sorry, for the record, I started this, but I'm also quoting other black belts, world champion black belts, by the way. So this is not my advice. I'm not even for a second going to try and give advice on jiu-jitsu. But yes, to do one submission.
Okay.
Or one whatever. Pick one sweep. Pick one thing that you're going to work on. You know.
See, my brain then when we're talking about this, because I'm like, right, I might start doing that with like books and subjects on books, and just do 1 month on one thing, 1 month on another, and then by the end of the year, you got 12 subjects that you're pretty well read on, as opposed to just reading really broad. You're a genius.
Well, Keenan, thanks for that. But yes, I'll take that. Yes, yes. It is a good idea, because I was thinking about the same thing with like languages. You know, you could do anything like that. Have you read, by the way, totally going off topic now, but have you read the Utopia for Realists yet?
I've got it. I haven't read it. It's on my shelf. Good intentions. Right. It's going to be read soon. And I actually wanted to read that before I spoke to you, because I remember you recommended that, and I was like, right, well, if I read it, I might know some of these words that Shona's going to chuck at me. But yeah, I've got all good intentions, that book, and it will be read soon. But tell everyone about it. What?
It's just I actually gave my copy away recently to someone.
Good.
Who's like,
love to hear that.
Yeah, but he was like, babe, I'm not going to be able to read this for a while. I was like, why did I give it to you? Yeah. You know, when I give a book, it's because I'm like passionate about it at the time. But look, to be honest, it really goes into, the reason I like it is because it is what it says. It's like this utopia. It talks about the fact that there is a real possibility, and provides evidence for the fact that there is a real possibility for us to move into more of a sort of like luxury socialist model, essentially, where there's a lot more equality, there's free money, and they've done lots of tests on this already. So this is not me just throwing it out there and being like, like, you know, free money. This is something that has been tested, and he talks about the research in the different areas and countries and cities that it's been tested in. It treats humans in a much better way than this really wild capitalist model has moved into. So, you know, I recognize that I benefit a lot from capitalism, but I do think it needs reform. It's like really fucking out of hand. You know, the fact that we just live in like there are people living in severe poverty, and yet for everyone else that just didn't happen to be born in that circumstance or whatever, can kind of push in the direction of like absolute extreme wealth that's so unnecessary. You know, when you look at the numbers, there's another really good book that talks about the disparities and like how, I can't even remember what it is, but it's like the top, this is one of those things again where I should have remembered the numbers.
That's right.
So going to bring this up.
So whilst you think of that, I like the sound of Utopia for Realists, because I feel like I'm a realist, and I like the ideas of like the sort of the left, and I feel like I identify as like a more liberal than anything, but I'm also skeptical just about government in general. And I'm not saying like down with the establishment or anything like that, because I don't think that would be a good idea either. But that's why like reading those kind of books gives you a good sort of whole idea of where, if like which side of the fence you sit on, or if you're still sort of on the fence, you'll be able to see what that author has read to write that book, like in the back, their references and stuff like that. So it's a really good idea for people to read books along that line, so they can work out where they sit. And like no one's here to tell them that they're right or wrong, but it's just nice for them to know and be able to back up their opinion with statistics or like facts or just a general idea, and be able to articulate themselves better, so they're more confident in saying, this is the cause that I support.
I feel really attacked because I feel like I've done a terrible job of that this whole time.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I know, but you're like, you know, like they'll be really well read, have really good statistics that they can refer to. And I'm like, fuck.
But what I mean is like one statistic.
I know
what you need is one little statistic.
One really good one.
You know what you're doing. Yeah, exactly. You can read a whole.
I know, which I still can't even. Yeah. Exactly. Well, exactly. And that's the thing, is like, I do think that I don't know. The thing I like about books, like you said, is getting into someone else's head and seeing things from another perspective. At uni, at the moment, we're talking about critical thinking and the importance of it. And I have this, since reading about it, I'm like, holy fuck. Like, if we taught critical thinking in school as a subject, a standalone subject, I wonder if it would be capable of indoctrinating children and therefore adults into a much more empathetic mindset.
It would be nice. But I think curriculum, something I've got my cousin's like 12 and I was speaking to him about school. He's quite adult for a 12-year-old and it surprises me. And I was speaking to him about like the subjects they learn at school. And like they are getting taught like varied sort of lines of thought, varied religions from a young age now, which is quite nice. That I just didn't have like at school. Like I went to a Church of England school, so it was all sort of just Christianity. Whereas now, like my other cousin's like 8 years old. When I went to Jamaica last year on holiday with them, and he was telling me all about like Islam and stuff like that. And I was like, what a legend to be like 7 years old to have like a general sort of grasp of it.
Yeah, of course. And yeah. But still, that's much better than just one religion only.
So I always think like, oh, I have no faith in the educational system, but it is changing in positive ways. But like, critical thinking. Have you read? Is it Thinking Fast and Slow by?
No, I haven't read it.
I haven't read it either.
It's quite dry, but it's good. But it's
words
quite dry.
Are very small.
About the print.
Yeah, and that just intimidates me. So I'm just put off it. So I'm like, I'll buy another book. So it just goes further and further down the pile. And it's probably...
But Lost Connections did that too.
Oh, I loved that though.
Yeah, I know, but that's very small writing.
But this is way smaller.
Like, how? That was honestly,
so small. So small, the writing. And I'm like, well, what's the point? It's like 450 pages of tiny writing. And I'm like, that's going to take me so long to read. I can't be bothered. But... So you're obviously like, this is, sorry, I'm darting from one subject to another.
Sorry, I know.
Obviously, with you being at uni as well, and obviously you've got a business to run and you've got all your hobbies and staying active and doing all your wholesome activities. Like when do you read? Because I think that's a lot of people struggle to find the time to read and they don't sort of make it a priority. But obviously it's something like you read your papers and stuff for uni, but you're obviously still reading sort of books at, I don't know what rate, but like you're still finding time to sit down and relax and read.
This is such a good question because I recently was so angry at myself for just how much time I still was spending on Instagram and social media and just, I mean, you know what? It's not even social. What am I saying? Social media. It's Instagram. It's so addictive. And to be honest, like TikTok is addictive too, but when you go into it, you know, it's absolute mindless shit that you're just, you know what you're getting. You're like, okay, but Instagram's more manipulative because you go on it, you're like, no, I'm gonna learn something.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Shona's done a post at hip mobility, and like next photos I see down, it's like, well, that girl seems to have really good hip mobility on this. Like, right. And then exactly. And then it's a funny video or like it's someone doing some like sick basketball shot or some like jiu-jitsu stuff. And then I'm stuck and then it's like 12 o'clock and I'm like, get off.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. So this was happening to me. And I was also, because it's my work, I also find very clever ways of justifying. But the truth is none of the inspiration for any of my posts ever fucking comes from Instagram. Never, ever, ever. Never do even, and I love my peers. I love people around me. There are so many people that I follow in fitness, in nutrition, health and wellness that I absolutely love, but rarely do their posts inspire my posts. And actually it's more books that will inspire me. So another post that I'd done, I've got this book right. Here's one I prepared earlier. This is How to Build a Healthy Brain, which is Kimberly Wilson, another incredible author. She's a psychologist, absolutely incredible. But I actually made myself sit and read this instead of doing that sort of morning scroll that can sometimes happen. So I think that's a really good book hack, reading hack, is sort of like that temptation to kind of use this as your means to get the dopamine firing in your brain. Instead, it's kind of like have your alarm, just push stop, wake up, go make your coffee, do whatever other part of your morning routine you have, and just don't fucking do the phone. Just don't do the phone, and pick up a book and do like 20 minutes reading a book. And honestly, it's been such a game changer for me. I'm like, yes, I'm gonna get through so many books. And then that's the stuff that does actually inspire, content, a lot of the content that I create.
And when you like contemplate afterwards, that's when ideas come into you. But so you're talking about your phone as like your alarm. Best thing I've ever done. Bought an alarm clock on Amazon for like £6, this like Casio one. And like I wake up before it now anyway. But like I had my phone out the room from like 9 o'clock, and it was a habit I was really good at. I was reading in the morning, and my phone has slowly sort of crept its way back into my room. I know.
How does it do that?
Weak piece of shit. Stupid phone. But also, just a quick one. You held up your phone there. Obviously, we got a Vertue phone case. That merch. This an ad. Are we doing ads?
It's actually
phone case is available through Shona's website, which is
ShonaVertue.com. Use my discount code. No, this is not. This is actually. This was. I can't even remember the brand, but it's just a brand that I just am such a narcissistic twat bag that I was like, I'm going to put my name on my phone. I should have said something else, like a message. Do you know what? Now I know what you're getting for your birthday. It's going to say, read.
I'm going to make bookmarks.
Sounds like a last
soon.
name.
I'll send one to you. I'm going to get some bookmarks made, and
that's actually a good idea. You're going to get proper ones, like ones
proper.
that.
I'd get 1,000 for like £30. Oh, just like a nice silk paper. Don't know what the GSM is going to be. Yeah, not like a nighty kind of silk. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it was like £30 for 1,000. So I was like, well, that sounds pretty good. Like that'll be easy.
I think you should get something that's somewhat made out of a sustainable source. So something that's recyclable or has a really good chain.
That's what I'm trying to go for with like t-shirts and jumpers and stuff. Because that's all my mum wants me to do is make jumpers so she can have a hoodie. But I need it to be ethical and sustainable. Yeah. And like I want one because I just want to wear it around all the time. So then people are like, oh, what's he doing? I was looking at getting some budgies made yesterday. Just some like custom budgie smugglers. But it's just expensive. And I can't justify 50 pairs when pretty much most of the listeners are women. But I'm still going to do it because if there's one thing people look at, it's people in budgies, especially in the UK, because no one wears budgies. So everyone will be like, oh, what's he wearing? What's that say on his arse? Oh, I need to read. There you go.
Oh, marketing. Is that really not a thing to wearing budgies in the UK?
No, not in England. If I go down the beach, I'm pretty much, well, I don't. I wear budgies because I want that even tan. But
is that why?
It's like rugby lads will wear it in England, but no one else. Like when you go down to the beach in Bournemouth, pretty much no one in budgies. You get some funny looks, but those looks.
I was always taught. I was told that the point of wearing budgies was also because once you go from swimming in like shorts, where it's all like stuck to you, and then you go swimming in budgies, it's just so much more comfortable. Which makes
and it's liberating as well.
Yeah,
because like, you're all on show. It's literally take it or leave it. If you're at like a party or something like that, say you're at a pool party, everything's there. You can't just be like, oh, I wonder what's in those shorts. Like, oh, well, I can see exactly what's in those budgies. I'm not impressed, but we'll go with it.
Okay, so here I'm going to give some perspective here. This is a PSA. Okay. Yeah. There is some, and I can't speak on behalf of all women, but perhaps some women will agree. Women.
I'm so excited for this.
Are you hot? Are you getting hot?
Yeah, I'm pretty hot, to be fair.
Don't worry. I'm not going to say so it's the reason. Okay, the reason this came to mind was because you're talking about the visual aspects of a woman kind of like looking at a man and being like, But for the most part, I think most women will be more attracted to your bants and your ability to kind of like, because you can kind of, I really can't speak for all women. I really can't. There are definitely going to be women that sit outside.
I know what you mean though. But people that wear budgies have charisma.
Right. Yes, that's true. They tend to have relatively good chat. relatively, depending, or maybe they have absolute zero chat and that's why they wear the things, because it's a point of conversation. But what I was about to say was actually in reference to dick pics, because not a dick pic, but a dick pic, because
wait, so are we D-I-C-K or D-I-P?
No, so not dick pics. Dick pics are great, send those. I love to see when people have gone for a dip. But a dick pic, if we put aside the ones where it's just general like violation and the men get off in sending a dick pic because they're just I just want to send a dick pic. I don't know. I can't even begin to try and insert my mind and develop any sort of empathy for that because I don't get it. But chances are a girl doesn't want to see your dick for the most part. Even if you're seeing her, I just don't think she wants to see your dick. It's too anatomical. It's too like, and also we can't do anything with that. We like the person for the most part that is the rest of the body, not just the willy. And it's like, but on the other hand, I think men are a bit different because you guys are quite visual, no?
Yes, I personally not that.
Don't want vag pics.
No, well, like, I mean, sure. Send it over, anyone. Like, I'll let you know if I'm bothered. Usually, not that bothered. I'd never be like, oh, what are you? And like, honestly, like, obviously, I'm friends with a lot of girls, and I hear the stories of like how guys speak to them, and it's just embarrassing. Just the overuse of emojis, the overuse of like hints that like there's no straight talking. It's just like hints, like about like getting a picture of their tits or like getting a picture of their ass, and it's just hints after hints. Like,
but
firstly,
also,
if you want to see,
just want a picture. Like, there's so much on the internet. I don't really understand. Like, aren't you dating someone because of everything else about their personality that's attractive and sexy? And there's so much more to sex than just the body. So this is a part I never understand. Why do men think that we would want to have a picture of their dick and be like, oh?
I think. Well, let's not generalize men.
Sorry, you're right. Let's not generalize.
but
generalizing.
Yeah, I like an unsolicited dick pic, I imagine as a girl is pretty traumatic.
But what if it's solicited? Like, as in, what if it's like you're seeing someone and then they send you a dick pic? Sorry.
Well, like if they've asked, like if this is
that's
like
different.
If this is a thing where they're like, hey, like, let's see your piece, you'd be like, yeah, okay, here's my piece. But if it's just like, oh, here's a picture of my ass, like, oh, look, here's my angry little soldier in my pants, little trouser snake, looks all aggressive. I think maybe that's a bit too far.
Yeah. So this is what I'm trying to understand, because I sort of feel, and look, this is not coming from like experience, because thankfully I think I've been quite lucky in that sense. And actually I have this conversation where I'm like, I just don't get sent dick pics. Maybe this conversation is going to like some person's going to be like, all right. But no, I don't. Yeah, well, I don't get them. And I'm sometimes like, should I be offended that I never get a dick pic? But I feel quite proud of the fact that I don't.
I feel like they might be scared of the response.
Because they'll probably post it or something.
Yeah. Well, I would do that anyway. Well, like, I mean, I wouldn't. I think publicly shaming like that can just traumatize someone forever. So I think maybe a stern telling off.
Send you
no, of course.
Unsolicited picture of their genitalia. Like, that's the thing. It's like, don't send it anyway. But yes, so maybe they are a bit scared. But what I'm trying to understand is like the difference between, and again, I can't generalize with gender, but we can sort of say there's definitely very distinctive differences between a brain that's like very visual, and then a brain that's sort of like, it isn't that. And I think that there's a large portion of men that tend to be very much about the visual. And so they make this assumption that women are also like that. And again,
I think it's a maturity thing.
Hashtag. Is it though?
I think so. Because I think there's a lot of like, I'd say just generally people out there that haven't matured at the rate that maybe they should have. Girls obviously mature at a faster rate than males. And then some guys just kind of get stuck at the point where they should just be pushing through to maturity, and they're like, I just want to be one of the boys forever. Which, I mean, like, fair enough, live your life that way, like, live it however you want, but just don't send a picture.
There? Is it safe there?
What, in lad culture?
Yeah, like,
no,
it's
no,
yeah, it's not
emotionally
safe.
Traumatic, I would say, lad culture.
So then why would you want to stay in it?
Because it's probably easier for a man to pretend than to actually open up. It's nowadays as well, like there is a big sort of male stereotype of, oh, I want to be the man, I want to be the boy. Whereas being more emotional, being more open, you open yourself up to scrutiny from all the other sort of chest beating ape men out there. And like, see, I'm saying this, and I haven't really been that guy in the past, but there's definitely times where I've played up to the lad culture. Whereas now I'm completely like, hey, look, I'm emotional. Like, right, my name's Ed. I go to therapy and I cry sometimes.
Yeah.
That's, people are shocked by it. Whereas it's completely normal. I would say, well, for me it is. Like, it's my normal. I think other people will get there. But I think I think I've got to this stage of sort of my openness and stuff like that through like reading books. Like,
do you think
like,
that's what that has done it for you?
I genuinely think I've ego is the enemy is the one thing that like I sort of dropped off there, and I was like, what am I pretending to be? What is this person that I'm portraying to people that's not actually me, because I've got an ego and I'm trying to protect that. As soon as I drop that back, I've been more authentically myself and more, say, emotional, and like the conversations that I have with people are more on about connecting with that person as opposed to just having a surface level conversation where I'm like, you're right, nice tits.
Yeah. Is that,
You know what I mean?
was that you before? I
This
can't
is
picture
well, yeah,
that.
no, it wasn't. But like,
wow, what a transformation from ego is the enemy.
yeah, honestly, such a good book. Like, and
is a good book.
I think ego is a lot of people's downfall. Many people out there, if not all.
Yeah. Which is interesting because it's like we all have it, and we are all in essence conscious beings trying to become aware of ourselves through this process of life. And it's unfortunate that we can't seem to recognize that in the other. Like, we can't seem to recognize that that person is just trying to get on with their life and escape suffering and, you know, trying to live a life and develop themselves and whatever. And so am I. And, you know, kind of like, I mean, that is, interestingly enough, to a degree, and without a lot of the sort of dogma attached to it, that is what namaste actually means.
Okay.
Did you know that?
I didn't. Learn
So
something every day.
namaste, which we say at the end of yoga, for anyone that doesn't know what the hell that means, or has never heard that word, is a Sanskrit word, which means that, and I'm going to say it like this, but it means that mostly we hear the translation as the light in me bows down to the light in you. And the way that I used to explain it to people, or it also can be translated as like the God in me bows down to the God in you. I like to translate it as purely like this sort of the consciousness in me, or the conscious ability of me, like sees and is aware and bows down to that same conscious awareness that is in you. And it's, I mean, how beautiful is that as something to acknowledge and really truly acknowledge in just one word. We don't really have words like that in English. Sanskrit's a really powerful language. God, we've talked about a lot here. How did
I love this. This is great. I don't know actually how long we've been on the thing for, and I don't know how to find out, but that's fine. I think that's amazing. And just going back in terms of what we were saying prior to that, because I had a thought about, we were talking about like ego and stuff like that, and talking about people reading books and sort of reading for growth. I now, at this stage of my life where I haven't before, think intellect and like vision for sort of growth and openness is way more attractive than like other people that I consider boring. And I don't, and then it's not nice for me to say that someone's boring, because that's subjective and that's the way that they want to live their life. But also I should hold a standard for myself and people that I'd want to let into my life. But if somebody's talking to me about books or about like a different, or they're like passionate about a certain like cause, something, I'm like, oh, yes, you're fit. But like, not because they're aesthetically fit. I know like Australian listeners think fit means fitness, but in England fit means hot.
Fit means hot. Yeah.
But like that's hotter than like just having your whappers out, I would say.
What's a whapper? Is that
tits.
a vagina or
Nah,
boobs?
tits.
Okay,
Yeah,
boobs.
you don't walk around with your
Breasts.
vagina out very often.
Well, I'd hope not, but I don't know what kind of woman you're referring to here.
Who knows?
But, each to their own as well.
Yeah.
Like that's a social norm. Perhaps in some, totally fine to have.
Yeah.
What whappers? Never heard of that. Whappers. I'll write that one down and remember it. But
Get that one down in the slang.
I think. But this is the thing: is like the more, because that is such a narrow perspective of like what is attractive in a woman, and again, that's like male gazy. The whappers one, not the other one. That's very male gazy. That's like objectifying, and it's kind of like that woman is only hot if I can in some way sexualize her. But what you're saying you find attractive now is the fact that it's just another human that's also wanting to better themselves, explore life, increase their knowledge, increase their empathy. Like fundamentally, I just think that that's another huge part of what is amazing about books is that it increases empathy.
100%.
Depending on the book that you're reading and who wrote it. And
I'm sure there's some pretty like neo-Nazi books out there, but like they're not going to make their way onto my shelf. But yeah, I think you become more compassionate the more you read, and I've certainly gone down a path where like the books that I'm reading are getting like quote unquote like softer as they go along. Like I've got one on radical compassion I haven't read yet, I think it's a woman called Tara Brach. She's like a meditation teacher, and I just thought like radical compassion, like I feel like that's when I die, whoever's at my funeral, if they're going to make a speech, I don't want them to talk about like God knows, like success or like how I looked or something like that. Like I want them to talk about what like a kind and compassionate human being. And over the last sort of like year or so, and like I wasn't a total prick before, but people always say to me like, "Oh, you're so nice now." It's like it's a pleasure to be around you. And I'm like, do you know what? That is probably like the best thing I could hear, because it means
what happened? What were you before?
Well, like I just wasn't open to this stuff. Like, and I always say it as if I was a real piece of shit, but I really wasn't. But there was definitely like I just was more. I was just closed off, like I just righteous, and I'm an introvert anyway. So as soon as I've ran out of my 2 hours of speaking to big groups, I then have to force behavior, and it's like when you're doing a workout and you feel like you're done, and then you have to really push through that like final set or something. And that's how I felt socially, because I'd be fine for a couple of hours, and then after those couple of hours I'd start playing up or acting up to the group, because I'd be like pushing through and it's not coming out as like an authentic self. And the only reason that I sort of know this now is because I've read a book on introverts, and I was like, shit, that's me.
Was it called Quiet?
Yeah, by Susan Cain. Such a good book.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Slow at the end, but really good book.
Yes, I agree. But it's also one of those books where you're sat there and you're going, oh, I feel seen. I feel seen. Yes, completely. Definitely.
It is hard to be an introvert in modern society, because everyone will think that I'm an introvert. But like, I remember you said that you saw me at jiu-jitsu once, but I looked miserable, and you didn't want to say hello because I was walking out. That would have been because I was just done for the day, and like and I come across as rude sometimes to people, but it's not rude and it's not intentional. But like,
I didn't think you were rude. I thought you were just upset.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question that's going to be a bit like, I hope it's not going to be like too confronting.
Yeah, go.
Do you think that your transformation, your personality transformation, or not even your personality transformation, but your value around wanting to become a kinder person, coincided with your heartbreak?
Nah, because it was before then.
Damn it.
But thanks. All right. Great. Hopefully everyone that's local to me has stopped listening from now. But edit that out. Nah, keep that in for authenticity. But no, I don't think so. I think that's definitely, I learned a lot about myself from that. And
what did you learn? Can you give me 3 lessons that you learned from heartbreak? I'm so curious.
I think more so in like impulse. I've learned to accept that I'm an impulsive person because like when I broke up with my ex, I went straight to Bali 3 days later and I worked out that was the best decision I ever made. So I'm now trusting my instinct. And I think there's something about that, like in the Tao of Pooh, sorry.
Yes,
It talks about like impulse being something and your instinct something to work with, and same in the Code of the Extraordinary Mind, like just the previous episode on. He talks about those who trust their instinct and those who don't. And those who trust their instinct, there's been times where authors have had that thought and they haven't followed through with the instinct to write this book, and someone else has written it because the universe is like, well, if you don't want it, I'm giving that to someone else.
Yes, that's also in Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Pray Love. And she talks about that concept of like ideas just want to be fulfilled and manifested into reality. And so if you don't move with it, that energy will pass through you. A lot of like artists talk about that too, where they sort of have the idea and then it washes through. And if they don't fulfill, okay. So impulse, you learned about impulse.
I learned that I'm not considerate enough of myself, which is something that I'm trying to work on, because I've always been like a not a carer in a way, but like I always try and like look after other people in a certain, and mainly in relationships, because when I love really intensely, which is something I've also learned is something to recognize and be like, oh, actually, like, love yourself this way before you do anything else, bro, because like you're only going to upset yourself at the end. So I think those are the sort of two things that I've learned there, and they're really important lessons. And it's something that whatever next relationship I have, which I really can't see being for a while, because I'm really enjoying like making sure that my confidence doesn't come from someone else, and that my sort of sense of self isn't attached to another person. So and I think even prior to relationships, I'd probably slept with a higher number of girls than society thinks is okay, because I'd attach my confidence to that.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Mad, isn't it?
So interesting.
And just a shout out to everyone that's still listening. So this isn't about books, but I think this is an interesting conversation for everyone to listen into. So
to bring it back to books,
no. Like, well, we can bring it back to books, but I think so. Those are the three things that I've learned from that. I also, what did I do? I read a book called How to Fail by Elizabeth Day after I broke up. Really feminine book, but I was like, actually, like, it's got a lot of really good points in it.
Interesting. Yes. I listened to a book called The Obstacle is the Way, which was fucking so helpful during a breakup. I listened to Love
do you know what's really funny? Do you know who also gave that book as a really good book to listen to after a breakup?
Oh no. Is it the same person that probably told me to read it when we broke up?
Yes.
So we spoke about reading this book. I think because we sort of talked throughout the whole breakup anyway. We were talking the whole way through. It didn't get like ever too like, I mean, it did a bit, but anyway. But he basically was like, you should, he's like, I'm listening to this book. It's amazing. I think he was like in Queensland or something. Yeah. And I'd just come back from London. And I remember, so some of the things that I learned from Heartbreak were similar to yours in just how much I was resting my identity in the hands of someone else and in the validation that someone else would provide for me. And I think that's natural to a certain degree, because we do, this is a relationship-based universe that we exist in. And I don't know what other universes are like, so I don't know why I say that, but it's like, everything that we do in life requires relationships. So I think that if we move too much in the direction of independence, it can sometimes be that you build this wall and then you become completely incapable of ever having a relationship ever again. And this is definitely something that I've had to work through. Now I seek healthy interdependence. So it's kind of more like, okay, like, what are the expectations? As long as I'm not expecting you to be the sole provider of my happiness, the sole provider of my sense of self and empowerment, then we're okay. There's obviously going to be a back and forth with relationships, because that's, you're entering into
someone
sort
else's
of silent
world.
Yeah, totally. And so it's like, I enjoy being in relationships whereby I love to love. I love to help that person. I actually struggle with receiving a little bit. Do you struggle with receiving?
Yeah, I feel awkward whenever anyone says anything nice to me about the podcast. I'm like, cheers. Thanks.
Yeah, and
Why are you saying that? Like, why are you being nice to me? Go away. Obviously, keep it coming. I'll learn to accept it one day. But like when I see like friends and stuff now, they're like, oh, I really like what you're doing. I'm like, oh, really? Oh. But that's a self-esteem thing. Like that's something I've got to work on. Like, and I say that to people, and they're like, well, you don't have issues with self-esteem. I'm like, you have no idea.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. But everyone, I think everyone does.
Yeah. Yeah, but people won't admit to it, and that's what comes with being open and being able to say, actually, that is an issue that I've got. There's certain parts of my life that I'm comfortable in, and there's certain parts that I'm really not. That interdependence thing is that 7 Habits of Highly Effective People with Stephen Covey.
I love that book, but no, healthy interdependence was something that I actually learned about in therapy, because basically, you know, after a series of breakups that felt like they were getting progressively more and more painful, I was sort of like, okay, hang on a sec, I'm definitely doing something wrong here, like this. And to be honest, I was probably doing something wrong in all of the breakups anyway, because we're not perfect, as you have pointed out. And I think that as it started to get worse and worse and worse, I was like, I really need to face what it is I'm doing here that is problematic. And a lot of it was because I would either I basically haven't been able to find, and I think I'm getting there now, but I haven't been able to find this nice balance between like independence, like severe independence, where I'm literally like, I don't want anyone, stay out, I'm fine. This kind of, I'd use feminism as a little bit of a protective mechanism as well, to kind of shut people out. And that is not a nice place either. That's a very lonely place. You can put your head into books or whatever and try and distract yourself. But fundamentally, that's not where you want to be. But then I'd get into a relationship and find that wall would come crumbling down. And behind that wall was a very, I guess, like soft, I want to say, you know, a vulnerable person that hadn't actually allowed herself to dismantle that feminist wall and try to actually speak to the soft, vulnerable side of myself underneath and say, like, what is it that you need? Because we shouldn't be trying to get it from some other guy. We should be trying to get it ourselves and see how we can kind of know that that's there. But then when we do bring it to someone, acknowledge that it's okay to have needs, and those needs can be met by someone else, but you just have to be able to bring them authentically to the table.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean?
I love that.
Like a double podcast.
No, it's cool. What actually changed sort of my way of thinking around this, and I spoke to Siobhan about this on the podcast the other day, is Mark Manson's book Models, and he talks about authenticity. Yeah, that's the right way to say it. And that, I feel like it although many people in the world are not ready for people's authentic self and they want surface level shit, you find your relationships are better when you go with 100% authenticity and be like, hey, like, there is this other side of me that isn't always the best, but like, I'm doing my bit, I'm trying hard, or like I'm trying to make that work. And like I think all blokes should read that book, because it's just a different way to look at things. And like, people think it's like a pickup artist book, but it's really, really not. It's so much more than that. And Mark Manson's such a clever guy.
That's really interesting. I'd never heard of Models. I'd never heard of that.
No one has. No one's heard of that book.
That's so interesting. I need to read that. So the thing is, one of the things that I had to face was the fact that I had a deep fear that if I expressed a need, that I would be abandoned. And this obviously had developed, this was a belief pattern that had developed in childhood, and then was obviously manifesting itself in relationships. So what I found I would do is hide my needs for so long to the point that then all of a sudden that just explodes because you can only pretend for so long.
Yeah.
And then suddenly what happened? Did you just have like a wave of an idea?
I've got a thought for you, but you keep going. I won't forget this.
Right. So I basically would then I would be doing the suppressing of my needs, but then resenting the other person for not meeting my needs. So it was this cognitive dissonance that was coming up, whereby I would be like, how selfish that you can't meet my needs. But it's like, I wasn't actually being authentic with them. And then it would just come out in this explosion of vulnerability and needs and just like absolute desperation that isn't attractive, but also that's also not authentic. It's just that I'd done all the suppressing. I had done most of it. So I think those are some of the interesting things that can come after heartbreak, but they sort of come after you have the heartbreak, you get over the pain, and then you have to sit with yourself and you're like, okay, I can take a moment to just really look at the situation with in a more critical way, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
What was your big epiphany wave thing?
My epiphany it's a thought that I've had, and I've spoken to quite a few people about this in terms of modern day dating, and people always put on a front, whether you've met online or you meet someone, like when you're out, like if you're out, like you've had some booze, you're confident, you're like coming at it strong. You then go on a date and both of you are pretending to be something that you're not. So you've got one person over here, right hands up, everyone that's just listening, left hand up for also people that are listening, and you're pretending to be something. As this relationship goes on, you start to become your authentic self, and you're moving towards this middle point where when you both become your authentic selves, you spread apart because they don't work together. But the false sort of surface level shit that you come up with at the start, they're like, oh, I really like that. But really, like, he is pretending to be softer than he is, but he's actually a bit harder. She's pretending to be harder than she is. And that can work vice versa. I definitely pretend to be a bit harder than I am sometimes, or used to do. And then it gets to the point where, oh, fucking hell, Ed's crying again. Like, and there's like a joke in my family, because when I was younger, I just cried all the time. So my sister would be like, yeah, Ed cried. I don't do it anymore. And I'm only at a couple cries this year, but like, I'm not ashamed to cry or admit to crying. But like, there's definitely been relationships before where I've been this person at the start, and then by the end of this relationship, I'm like actually myself. And they're like, well, like, I didn't really sign up for this. And it's not anything against how I'm behaving or how they're behaving. Exactly. It's just that we're two completely different people, that it just doesn't work.
Yes. But wouldn't it be great if we could just bring our authentic selves at the beginning? A lot less time would have been wasted.
Yeah, we just need to top up with self-esteem. But people haven't got that anymore, unfortunately.
Well, but but is it about having self-esteem, or is it about just saying, well, it is, because it's kind of like saying, I'm imperfect, but I'm also worthy. That's important. I think it's also a question of sort of saying, I don't know, it's a big thing. I mean, think about the reason that we tend to like having alcohol is because it removes pretense. And so in terms of dating, is that when you remove the pretense, it suddenly becomes a little bit easier to interact, which is a shame. But I think that if we were to get comfortable in the uncomfortable, you know, and get comfortable
sit with your shit.
And we're back to poo.
Yes, we've gone full circle.
Like
this
full
is great.
Circle.
I know what you mean.
Came up with dick pics and all kinds of then
I like it. This has been a varied conversation, to say the least.
Very.
But yeah, if people would just sit with their shit more, like, it's not going to feel great. Metaphorically, it's going to stink a bit, but like, that's what's needed to sort of
sit with your shit, but also hold the shit for someone else.
Yeah, I guess so.
But like, do you know what I mean? It's like, how can we like hold space for people? Like, that's another thing that I think has had really intense deja vu. But yeah, I think that if we were able to hold space for that, I think would be something. And this is why we come back to this notion of like trying to dismantle these gender norms that sort of say that men can't express themselves, or that women are too needy, or things like that. Because they just kind of, regardless of gender, let's just talk about human needs and what's required of a human. And a human is in need of love and belonging, regardless of their gender, regardless of whatever gender they do or they don't associate with. Or identify with. So it's like, it's just, how do we get more human, acknowledging humanness. Radical compassion.
Well, I'm going to read it pretty soon because I've just finished this Tao of Pooh, so I'm ready to move on to a different book, and that might be it. And actually, it's not going to be it because I already know I'm going to read How to Be Right in a World That's Gone Wrong, and it's got loads of controversial subjects from like a lefty sort of
interesting
journalist. So I'm quite excited to read that. But I mean, everyone can tune in for the next episode to listen to my review of that one. Yeah,
you absolutely should tune into.
But Shona, what I'm going to do for transparency for everyone that's listening is I'm just going to stop recording in a moment, and then we can just have a chat because I need to go to the toilet. But where can everybody? Where can everyone find you? Tell her.
You can find me on Instagram, Shona_Vertue, or on my website, ShonaVertue.com, or on YouTube. I do a lot of free workouts on YouTube. YouTube's a great resource.
Yeah, definitely.
Find me there.
And they can join the Virtue Crew, which I am a member of, but I'm
I've still got a picture of you. I was going to hold it up and like shame you, but that's not the point.
No,
we're not into shaming. No, we're not into shaming, but I was going to try and sort of motivate you, not through shame.
I was going to do it today, but I've hurt my shoulder and my wrist from falling off my skateboard pretending I was a child. So
okay, and you're scarred. Yeah. So I've basically, for anyone that's listening, I've got a photo here of Ed that is of him doing a cross-seated position, and so we're hoping that just sitting cross-legged, and basically in 12 weeks he's going to be in the middle splits.
Do you reckon?
No,
okay, all right. Well, I don't know. I've known that I'm unflexible for 20 years, and I've done
nothing about it.
I have such good intentions.
It's going to be so good if you get your spider guard, your all that stuff's going to be so good.
That is true.
All right,
It'll benefit me. I'm going to stop recording, but
bye, everyone.